Please remain upstanding for the prayers, please. Please be seated, please. Well, good afternoon, everybody. We'll start with apologies for absence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lynn Pallister and Sheila Hollyoak. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we've got Councillor Tim Gray and Councillor Sandra Smith.
Thank you. Declaration of interest form should be going round. Could I have the minutes of the last meeting confirmed, please? Seconder. Right, the Mayor's announcements. After today's full council meeting, the Redcar Community Hearts Christmas lights will be switched on, followed by mince pies and refreshments. Everybody's welcome to attend. The Redcar High Street Christmas light switch on will take place on Saturday the 7th of December at 5 p.m. There will be a Christmas market and entertainment throughout the day. My recent charity night at the Courtham Hall raised over £1,000, so thank you to everybody who attended. Also, thank you to everybody who supported the Remembrance Sunday events which took place throughout the borough. Is there any announcements from the leader?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to highlight some of the key events since we last met in October. In October, the first tickets went on sale for the rail journeys, which will give the direct link from Redcar Central to Manchester, Leeds and York. It's another step forward that is a vital link between our borough and the cities out of here. I'm delighted to update the council that the position with Network Rail about Redcar Station has now been, it's very positive, it is moving on, and we are now in advanced negotiations of the future of the building, and I will bring you an early update early next year. I attended Redcar Cleveland College graduation ceremony, which was actually held here. It was excellent, and thank you for any of the other members that came. I spoke to the North East Chamber of Commerce and had a meeting with them and gave them an update on to where Redcar Cleveland were and where we were heading. Very positive meeting that I think was quite well accepted. I've been up to Woodsmith Mine with Cirrus and had a look at what's going on up there. I am in regular meetings with them. I've written to the Prime Minister on 2 occasions, and I can tell the council that I have had replies from him, and we will be having some dialogue, however, we have in Parliament in the next few weeks, no doubt. I attended the City of Culture, it's the Sandpit event at Mima, and we were looking at the combined authority Tees Valley across the region to bring something in which will bring in all the communities. At the start of November, one of the most inspiring events of the year was held, and it was the Children in Our Care Awards. It was attended by more than 200 people and saw 14 separate awards given for huge achievements over the past 12 months. These young people thoroughly deserve their recognition, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the members, businesses and other organisations who so generously sponsored the evening. I'd like to thank Councillor King for the massive effort that she made with this. And as corporate parents, you all made a difference, the members who turned up. Thank you for that. We've seen a great deal of hard work starting to come to fruition with the development of plans for the Regent Cinema in Redcar. When the project is complete, the new cinema will be quite a fabulous resource for everybody in the borough. The initial plans go out to public consultation early in the new year, and we look forward to receiving feedback. Another significant development was the opening of the 1.6 million Archway Learning Lane campus on the site of the former Teesville Infant School. The new archways can now operate on a single site and build on its excellent record of guiding its young people to their very best start in life. We welcome the news that British Steel has been sold to the Chinese firm. There is still some negotiations going ahead with that, but I understand that this is extremely positive. What we didn't want was a situation that we had prior, where our workforce were tested as they were with SSI. We still haven't actually recovered from that. And our plants that we've got at Skinny Grove and Lackenby, we've got to make sure that they are maintained. Hopefully that's going to be the case. And of course we all agree that the steel industry in this borough is vital, and we look forward to working with the company on a long-term basis. The borough once again did itself proud in honouring those who served their country in conflict and paying tribute to those, and we will all, of course, continue to do so. Many people lost their lives in battle, and we will always remember them. My thanks go to all the members who represented the council at ceremonies across the borough, and of course Mr Mayor. I've opened a new apprentice training facility at Tees Components, and for those of you who don't know where that is, it's Skelton. I was amazed by what they were doing up there. It is a family-run business. The apprentices that they've got in there, and they are doing them on a regular basis, taking apprentices in there. They're doing work not just for the UK, but overseas works, and I was quite absolutely fascinated. Of course, they didn't let me play with any of the equipment. A lot of it was computerised, and I bet they thought, no, we won't let her have a go with that. The police station, as you probably all know, at Loftus will be opening in the next few weeks, which will serve the East Cleveland area. We also have staff going in from Redcar Cleveland Council, and so it will be a hub, not just the police station. I understand that there was a meeting up at Hemlington the other night. Unfortunately, I had another meeting, but I understand a lot of the members attended, and the feedback that I'm getting from there is absolutely positive, and that's a good thing. And it's a good thing that Redcar Cleveland Council work alongside Cleveland Police. We work together in partnership. We'll go forward in partnership. Of course, you all know that I sit on South Tees Development Corporation and the site and Tees Valley Combined Authority. I've attended several meetings, and I hope to bring you some news shortly in the new year about what's happening on those sites and moving forward, but it is very positive. You may also have seen that Saltburn Cliff Tramway has been nominated for a national accolade for the second year in a row, which we are delighted about. The tramway was awarded a Visit England welcome accolade last year after receiving an 86% quality score by assessors. This year they've upped the tramway's score to 91%, and it's especially pleasing that the staff who run the tramway was singled out for special praise. We have staff in. There are awards coming for the Mayor to accept. And if I can just do them one by one, Mr. Mayor, if that would be okay. Wonderful news that Kirkley the Museum has again received national recognition, this time for its excellent education services. The museum has been awarded the Sandford Award, which recognises quality and best practice in education provisions outside of school. I know a huge amount of skill and hard work goes into making the museum the fantastic attraction that it is. And I would like to thank everybody involved. You've done the council proud. And I would like to ask, and we've changed names, so you have to bear with me. We've actually got members of staff. We've got Jo-Ann Hodgson and Ellen Bissell. Can you come forward to the Mayor, please, and present your award? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The second award, Mr. Mayor, just want to tell Council I was actually honoured to go to London with one of our fantastic members of staff who run the Council's apprenticeship programme. Our council was the only one in the country to receive the Princess Royal Training Award from the Princess herself at St James's Palace. This prestigious award is richly deserved for the team's fantastic work, but the real reward is the difference that they've made to our young people's lives, many of them among the most vulnerable. Their futures are far brighter as a result, and we are determined to keep up this excellent work in the future. I would therefore like to ask Hayley Hooson and Karen Codlin to present the award to the Mayor. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the council, thank you very much for both these awards. Is there any announcement from cabinet members? Any announcement from the managing director, head of paid service?
No announcements, Mr. Mayor.
There's no questions from members of the public, so we move on to item 7, to consider, agree and report from the Cabinet and Council Committee. Councillor Nightingale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This particular report shouldn't really be controversial at all. What it proposes is to create a new company for the purposes of internal audit. There have been some issues in terms of recruitment and performance, and so consequently this addresses those particular issues. The recommendations actually involve the creation of a company as part of the Redcar group, which also has several other councils in the Yorkshire area dealing with the internal audit. I want to emphasise as well, Mr. Mayor, that this does not involve the health and safety issues or the risk and insurance management issues of the council. It's purely to do with the internal audit. The result of this will be that we need to set up a shareholders agreement, as you can see in the report, and we need to change the constitution. There will, in addition, Mr. Mayor, also need to be a constitutional change so that this can be put into practice effectively and constitutionally. As I said, the Redcar organisation is linked up with other councils throughout the Yorkshire area, and the benefits of this would be improved performance in the audit function, sustainability of the function into the future, and attractive career opportunities, and an ability to pool the skills that are needed for internal audit. Mr. Mayor, I commend this report to the Council.
Thank you, Councillor Nightingale. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Councillor Craig. Must be handling it. It's coming up as Councillor Craig. Have we got a Councillor Craig? Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm terribly sorry for the administrative confusion. We'll try to get that right next time. When this proposal came to scrutiny, I had a concern about the pension arrangements, given that this is perhaps an item that's not always covered in detail. I am happy to say that subsequent to the meeting, there was a comprehensive explanation circulated to members, explaining the structure that would be in place subsequent to the proposal being implemented. So I'm very happy to support the recommendation.
No more speakers. Councillor Nightingale to sum up, please.
Well, I'm delighted that we've got what appears to be unanimity on this. I did say this isn't controversial. It's already been through the scrutiny arrangements and the governance committee. So once again, I commend this to the council for approval.
Could we have a show of hands, please, for acceptance? That's carried. Next we have appointments for process for senior posts. Councillor Nightingale again, please.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. This again is fairly straightforward. It has been through the Governance Committee and the Resources Committee, and we have been able to respond to some of the issues that were raised by the Resources Committee. Basically, it's proposing, first of all, that the appointments panel for the directors and so forth in this council should be a standing committee, and you'll notice on the agenda there are appointments that are to be made today. There will be substitution possibly where people feel that they need to inject some expertise from other members. The second aspect is really stimulated by the need at some stage fairly soon for the appointment of a Director of Public Health. This is a joint appointment with the Middlesbrough Borough Council, and so consequently we need to set up proper arrangements for this. The recommendation is that there should be a committee composed of 4, in this particular case now, 4 members of this council and 4 members of Middlesbrough Council with an independent chairman. This would be the arrangement that would stand for future appointments. The chairman would be an independent co-opted member, and as you can see from the report, this would be Mr. Peter Kelly, who's had experience in the first instance of the public health issues. The Resources Committee actually raised the issue of ensuring that there was a majority of Redcar and Cleveland councils supporting a particular candidate, and to ensure that there was some sort of control in this particular issue. However, when this was investigated by the monitoring officer, it proved that there was a 1928 case that showed that this would not be allowed in local government appointments. So consequently, that particular issue is something that we cannot embody in this particular proposal. The other issue that was raised by the Resources Committee was the issue of proportionality. And as we've increased the membership in conjunction with Middlesbrough Borough Council from 3 to 4, it does mean that there will be a much greater level of proportionality. This is a change that we need to do in order to keep in line with legal requirements. And so, Mr. Mayor, I commend this proposal to the Council.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please?
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can I have a show of hands, please? Sorry. Oh, sorry. Tried to rush you through. Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to first of all thank the lead member for Resources for addressing the points that I raised in the Scrutiny Committee. This is particularly with reference to the joint appointments with Middlesbrough Council. I think the increased number will be helpful to ensure that we get the proportionality reflected in that committee, and I think that's very useful. I think I am still, however, disappointed that the law, as it seems in this case with the 1928 case, will not allow for Redcar and Cleveland members to agree in majority any particular appointment, and I think that is a flaw in this process. And whilst I recognise that we do need to have a process to ensure that we recruit the Director of Public Health, which is an extremely important post for both councils, and therefore this will probably have to go ahead for that, I do wonder whether the lead member for Resources might be prepared to look again at this process for future appointments, joint appointments, so that we can actually get a system that we have confidence in. Thank you.
Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo Councillor Jeffrey's points about thank you to the lead member for looking into this. I think over this side we're certainly pleased that the proportionality arrangements have changed to allow the fact that this council has 4 very distinct groups, and for those 4 groups to be represented through a membership of 9 I think is welcome. I think on the other issue around the majority of RCBC councils, which was raised at the Resources Scrutiny Committee that I chair, I'm not satisfied with the explanation that I got from the monitor officer. The R versus Teddington 1928 case is nearly 100 years old and was superseded by the 1972 Local Government Act. I'll quote the 1972 Local Government Act to you. Section 12, subject to the provisions of any enactment, all questions coming or arising before a local authority shall be decided by a majority of the members of the authority. We're not talking about creating a new authority here, so I think it's perfectly within Redcar's right to suggest that that act be carried out to its fullest, and that Redcar members can determine whether it's the right thing for them, and Middlesbrough members can determine it's the right thing for them. I do appreciate that this was looked at. I appreciate this is the legal advice that we got. I just don't agree with it.
Thank you, Councillor Massey. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like assurance that the possibility of substitution, having nominated the members of the panel, will be allowed without coming back to council, so that the availability of members is not an impediment to progressing any appointments. There was reference to that in the portfolio holder's introduction. I would just like an assurance that that will be the protocol.
Councillor Nightingale, to sum up, please.
Yes, well, of course, the law is the law, and we've got to obey it. But in my experience of doing these appointment panels, which probably is a bit too long, I've not had any experience of block voting, and the individuals I've always found have made their own judgment on the particular suitability of candidates. And I think that is quite reasonable. We are not delegates on these particular issues. However, I don't think things should be set in concrete, and if we need to investigate the law, as Councillor Massey and Councillor Jeffrey have asked us, but we're always prepared to do that, and we can monitor the situation. The law does change, so we may have to do that. As far as substitution is concerned, I never thought there was an issue about the availability of substitutes for this particular process, and if there were to be the case, I don't think we would be proposing that if there was some sort of block on this. So I'm fairly confident that substitutions will be allowed. All I would say, Mr. Mayor, is that we need to get this decision made, and I would commend this particular proposal to the Council.
Thank you, Councillor Nightingale. Could I have a show of hands, please, for acceptance? And all those against, please. This item is carried. Thank you. We move on to item 8, receive reports from portfolio holders. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do not intend to trawl through my report, which you've got in front of you, and is 20 pages long. Instead, I shall highlight the challenges and successes contained in it, always striving towards the Council's extant priorities of longer and healthier lives, strong and confident communities, improving the way we work, and a clean and safe environment. This is an annual report, and therefore I should like to thank my predecessor, Lynn Pallister, for all her excellent work during the first half of the year. Dealing with our challenges. Undoubtedly, finance is a serious challenge. Public health funding has steadily declined since the service was transferred from the NHS in 2013. The reductions in public health funding equate to 1.9 million. It now stands at approximately 11 million. I don't intend dwelling on this point because we're in the hands of the government. The important thing is that we make the most of those resources at our disposal. So what are we doing about it? Our officers are doing magnificent work, making our resources work harder. Our partnership with Middlesbrough has increased efficiency, and our efforts have been rewarded by some very successful funding applications, including £2 million across South Tees from the Arts Council for the extension of cultural activity, thereby, surprisingly perhaps, tackling health inequalities. Moving from finance, one of the most serious challenges facing our borough are the incidents of domestic abuse, increasing in Redcar and Cleveland faster than elsewhere on Teesside. 17,950 women in Redcar and Cleveland have experienced domestic abuse, with 21% suffering repeated abuse. And of course, abuse against males is now high on the agenda, and I would point out that in England, approximately 1/3 of domestic abuse attacks are inflicted on men, 2/3 on women. So what are we doing about it? We are addressing this unhappy situation through the Domestic Abuse Partnership and the Transformation Challenge, which raise awareness of domestic abuse, identify victims swiftly, support victims, help perpetrators change their ways, and build healthy relationships. This summer, we hosted a domestic abuse everyone's business event to raise awareness and to launch the Redcar and Cleveland Domestic Abuse Needs Assessment, which will be used to tackle domestic abuse through the Vulnerable Persons Model. We are organising a domestic abuse event on Monday, this Monday, at Grangetown, the first day of the United Nations 16 Days of Activism against Gender-Based Violence, as well as it being White Ribbon Day. A further challenge affecting female health is period poverty, damaging education, employment, health and esteem. So what are we doing about it? A South Tees Period Poverty Action Plan is being developed, and the Council has committed a grant of £3,000 to the Red Box project. Storage is provided in Redcar Library, and our Empowering Communities team distributes sanitary products to voluntary organisations. But there is a lot of stigma attached to this matter, making it extremely difficult to resolve. A further sign of the times is fuel poverty. Many people cannot afford to heat their poorly insulated homes. It's a problem particularly for the elderly, for whom it can be a real health hazard. So what are we doing about it? The South Tees Affordable Warmth Partnership has devised an Affordable Warmth Action Plan which targets support. Advice on fuel efficiency and support is given to the vulnerable. Improved heating and insulation are provided for those in needs. Things are improving, but with so many pre-1939 properties still occupied, it's a difficult challenge to overcome. I hope, like me, you've all attended the partnership's Warm and Well event in Westmoreland Road Community Centre before coming to this meeting. As far as illegal drugs are concerned, Redcar and Cleveland is 6th highest nationally for drug-related deaths. Unfortunately, drug abuse poses significant challenges. Substance abuse, addiction, and the crime associated with it are persistent problems. So what are we doing about it? We are starting to turn things round, employing Addiction, the Substance Misuse Service, to help deal with the issue, as well as using the key workers of the Transformation Challenge. Treatment completion rates are beginning to buck the previous downward trend in both opiate and non-opiate categories. A vulnerable persons delivery model is being developed to provide a more holistic and cost-effective approach. Naloxone nasal spray kits are to be issued to first responders and addicts to deal with opioid-related overdoses. Mental health and loneliness are major areas of concern because mental health cases are increasing in Redcar and Cleveland faster than the England average. We have 12,220 adults with recorded depression, and antidepressant prescriptions are 50% higher than the England average. Intentional self-harm hospital admissions in Redcar and Cleveland are 254 per 100,000 against 186 nationally. Nationally, 14.3 million working days are lost to mental health issues. The Council is employing a self-audit tool to see how successfully we are meeting the mental health and well-being needs of our staff. Also, it is now recognised that social isolation can be a major cause of mental health problems. So what are we doing about it? Although many mental illnesses require medical intervention and counselling, it is recognised that a significant cause is disconnection from the community. Across South Tees, our Empowering Communities team builds community resilience, awareness and responsiveness to mental health issues. Our mental health training hub rolls out courses on mental health first aid, support for young people and suicide prevention. It employs Public Health England's 5 ways to well-being: connect, be active, take notice, keep learning, give back. The 5 ways to well-being is also used as a major tool to combat loneliness, a problem growing in modern society. Our Transformation Challenge has established the It's Our Community group at the place I mentioned earlier at Westmoreland Community Centre to involve people in cooking, gardening and craft with the object of stimulating community interaction. 20 groups have been awarded funding with the help of our Empowering Communities team. This month sees the start of Public Health England's campaign Every Mind Matters, and the South Tees Action Plan has embraced its 5 ways to well-being model.
1 minute, Councillor Kerr.
Am I limited? I thought it was 10 minutes for the questions. Well,
10 minutes.
it doesn't say that in the book. It says it's for questions, Mr. Mayor, because I'm only a third of the way through. Right.
Carry on.
Yes, it may
But talk faster.
Yes, I feel like the next one. As far as suicide is concerned, for 2016 to 18, we were at 10.8 per 100,000, which is below the North East rate, but above that for England. So what are we doing about it? I think, Mr. Mayor, if you're going to cut me short, these are the challenges I'm dealing with. Can I just list the successes?
It's at my discretion, Councillor Kerr, and I haven't cut you short, so carry on.
You haven't? Okay, well, thank you. Now I've lost my place. Right, okay. We are working to reduce the stigma of suicide and to make people more aware of emotional issues. The Director of Public Health chairs the Tees Suicide Prevention Task Force, and a Suicide Prevention Coordinator works across the 4 Tees boroughs. Successes include reducing negative press coverage of suicides, obtaining £80,000 of NHS funding to encourage the 5 ways to well-being approach in the voluntary sector, working with the police to place signage in suicide hotspots, including information about the help that is available. Moving to housing, Carlinhow has a high proportion of old terraced privately rented properties, some of which historically are not well maintained. The village has also suffered from high levels of antisocial behaviour. So what are we doing about it? Last year we started a programme of engagement with both landlords and tenants aimed at improving properties, protecting vulnerable tenants and reducing crime. Working with the police and the fire brigade, we have made progress, and therefore the project has been extended until March 2020. If, however, insufficient progress is made, we shall consider applying for a selective licensing scheme requiring the highest standards from landlords. Again, on housing, there is the challenge of preventing vulnerable people being rendered homeless. So what are we doing about it? Along with Beyond Housing and the voluntary and community sector, we have developed the Empty Homes to Happy Homes model. It will bring empty properties back into use as affordable accommodation for vulnerable people excluded from social housing or struggling to access private renting. The scheme will go live in the new year. Enough of our challenges. What about our successes? Smoking is one of the most preventable causes of ill health and premature mortality. In Redcar and Cleveland, smoking rates have seen the second highest reduction in the region, from 21.8% to 13.5% in the last 5 years. We intend building on this success, and by 2025, the South Tees Smoke-Free Alliance aims to reduce the level of smoking to 5% through local initiatives and local action. A success story. The Transformation Challenge began with the Council spending £1 million in 2015 from the government. It's based on a key worker model coupled with community development. It supports people, often with complex multiple needs. It deals with issues like domestic abuse, drugs, alcohol, mental health, crime, antisocial behaviour, housing and debt management. It has been extremely successful, working with over 700 individuals and saving over 4 million across agencies. The funding runs out in 2021, but learning from the Transformation Challenge, we intend to use the same approach through a vulnerable persons model, another success story. To become a dementia-friendly borough is an aim of our corporate plan. We provide care and support in the community as well as in residential and nursing homes. We endeavour to create communities that support people with dementia and erase the stigma associated with it. The Council has trained over 1,600 dementia friends, helped 111 businesses become dementia aware, hosted a Dementia Action Week, carried out Dementia Friends education in primary schools, another success story. We have made significant progress in tackling alcohol abuse. In 2011, with Coast and Country Housing, we established the first Oxford House in England. It's an American idea, providing peer-led support in a secure environment which links to the local community. In partnership with Beyond Housing and with government money, we are setting up our second Oxford House, namely Cromwell House in South Bank. It's due to open in 2020 and will be run by the Voluntary Development Agency, another success story. Live Well South Tees recognises that the arts can contribute towards public health. Nationally, people who participate in the arts are 38% more likely to class themselves as healthy. Last year, thanks to a £2 million grant from the Arts Council, South Tees was able to extend participation in the arts to those least engaged in cultural activities. Another success story. The Best Start in Life project was originally aimed at primary school children, but it's now been extended to older children. It is aimed at reducing health inequalities by means of locality teams and works in conjunction with the South Tees Maternal and Infant Health Partnership. Progress includes a reduction of both smoking and drinking in pregnancy and an increase in breastfeeding, the activation of an asthma-friendly schools programme, the rollout of the Curriculum for Life, preparing the way for statutory personal social health and economic education in 2020. A partnership with Middlesbrough Council and the National Literary Hub aims at building parental confidence in teaching children to read, a vital antidote to worklessness and poverty. A pathway has been established that gives help and advice on sexual relations and the avoidance of pregnancy in teenagers. There has been a successful South Tees bid to be part of a capacity building programme led by the Children's Society aimed at improving outcomes for young people with alcoholic parents. Another success story. Redcar and Cleveland is the lead partner in the South Tees Local Delivery Pilot, commonly known as LDP. It's a 4-year programme. This is going to bring millions into the area, by the way, supported by Sport England to address health inequalities by encouraging the least active to be more active. It's aimed at people with specific health problems, like those with type 2 diabetes, those required to lose weight before surgery, and those suffering from obesity. The method is to provide motivation leading to sustained independent exercise. The pilot is aimed at the deprived locations of Grangetown, South Bank, remember it's South Tees, North Ormsby, Brambles Farm and Thorntree, where the biggest impression can be made on health inequalities. Another success story. Undernutrition and dehydration can be big problems for the elderly. We advise and train staff in the borough's care homes to identify and avoid what can be a serious problem. We continue to expand this service. Another success story. There are 32,000 deaths, mostly from respiratory and cardiovascular disease linked to air pollution in the UK each year. With Middlesbrough, we have developed the South Tees Clean Air Strategy, and it has paid dividends, for we've avoided having to declare ourselves an air quality management area. This summer, we held a Clean Air Day.
Councillor Kay will allow you 2 more minutes.
Well, I'll skip some of it then. Well, it's better than me reading out the whole report. Solburn Blue Flag, a great thing. We do well with our trading standards and commercial team. Our libraries have done exceptionally well, incorporating not the usual things in libraries, but health checks and benefit advice. Gisborne Libraries had the Gisborne Bible 900th anniversary of the Priory. We've got the Industrial Heartland Project, 3D models of mine workings in East Cleveland. I'll miss that out. Now, this bit has been tagged on late because we promised, after I think it was Karen King's motion, to report back on climate change. So you might like to hear the report. I've got 30 seconds.
I've allowed 2 more minutes, Councillor Quartermain. Let him continue, he's delaying it.
So far, our battle against climate change has been very successful, but paradoxically, it's our greatest challenge. In March this year, we passed a motion to make the borough 100% carbon neutral by 2030. Also, the aim of UK 100, of which we are a member. This is a difficult challenge because it means we not only have to reduce our own carbon emissions, but persuade industry, business and families to do likewise. As well as CO2, we now monitor methane and nitrous oxide and report them to the government in terms of carbon dioxide equivalency. Our carbon emissions have reduced
30 seconds, Councillor Kay.
Is that it? Can I just have a point of order, please? It doesn't say that the cabinet member is limited to 10 minutes. It says that the questions are limited to 10 minutes. So, and I therefore thought I had the freedom to give my full report. This is only about a quarter of the thing you've got in front of you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Kay. Councillor Quartermain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And, you know, while I agree with a degree of flexibility, I think, you know, that was taking a biscuit, that. You know, and which is fair enough. And if it's fair and proportionate across all members, when you're giving out discretion, that's fine, and I'm sure you will in future.
Well, I haven't said it wouldn't be fair and proportionate, so I don't see what your point is there.
Okay. Which is fine if it's proportionately shared with other members as well.
Can you get on with it, Councillor Quartermain? Otherwise, you'll be
my
moaning
time's
that hasn't
ticking.
gone on.
Yeah, my time's ticking. Okay. So, yeah, thank you for your report, Councillor Kay. And there is a lot of information here to digest, so thank you for that. And I like how you've set it out as well, giving your priorities on page 26. Under section 5 there, it says context, my priorities, 1, 2 and 3. Now I have a lot of questions, which I'm not going to subject the Chamber to. I'm going to send them to you directly, because I recognise it's going to take me a long time to get through.
Could you just make a few of your questions succinct and relate directly to the matters, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Generally, in terms of your priorities numbered 1 to 3, you set these out as 1, 2 and 3. supporting vulnerable people, supporting people to improve their well-being and tackling inequality through your approach to preventative measures and reducing demand on resources. So question one, if you are looking to reduce demand on resources and services which support vulnerable people, those identified as having issues and difficulties with health and well-being, domestic abuse, drug and alcohol, mental health, crime and antisocial behaviour, housing and debt management, which services are you specifically looking at to reduce? Question two, how do you plan to measure your success that preventative measures are working? And question three, do you plan in future to provide comparative data so we can scrutinise the data before us? Because currently we are unable to gauge this as there is no comparative data. So in your next report, in your next annual report, can we have year-on-year data comparative with national figures and regional figures, so we have that benefit of knowing whether we are going in the right direction or going in the wrong direction? Thank you.
You want me to
Councillor
answer
Kane.
now? Right, okay. You asked about how we're addressing these problems in society. I think there are two themes or headings which are very important in this report. One is the transformation challenge, and the other is the 3 ways to well-being. And the transformation challenge, as I mentioned, was based on a £1 million grant. It runs out shortly, but we're trying to develop a similar model through the vulnerable persons model. Now, the way we're doing this is by employing key workers who are, to some extent, specialists in particular fields, but at the same time, they're able to cut across and deal with other problems, because usually the people we deal with have complex problems. It's not straightforward. And sometimes what appears to be the obvious problem is being caused by something else. Now, this is proved to be a very efficient approach, and it's you can hardly believe this, I can hardly believe it. It's believed that across the services like the police, fire brigade, social services, etc., the transformation challenge has saved approximately £4 million. So it doesn't come back into public health necessarily, but we're saving for other services. So we're being far more efficient than we have been in the past. I think then you went on to ask about data. I do think, you know, the report would have been even more boring if it had just been a mass of data, and you wouldn't have wanted me to go through that. I do quite a lot of comparisons as we're going through on various subjects. I agree, however, that on the big issues that we're trying to deal with, we'll get some comparative data for next year. And can I also say that one big advantage of being in partnership with Middlesbrough in Live Well South Tees, we are exchanging data with themselves and exchanging methods and sharing our expertise very efficiently. I've just been to that thing about the Warm and Well in Westmoreland Road. I went to literally the Warm and Well counter. We've got a Redcar and Cleveland officer, a Middlesbrough officer sitting together, sharing information. And, you know, that's how I think it should be in the future. So yes, we'll try to give you a bit more data, but I don't want the report to be overwhelmed with it.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Councillor Corley.
Thank you, Councillor Corley. Thank you, Councillor Kay, for your report and how big, and I accept how big of a report it was. I'd just like to know, and I'm glad to hear that you mentioned regarding the men that have domestic violence, but why as an authority do we not like to talk about it? If you look in reports, it's not very often you see facts and figures regarding men, but you stated there's 1 in 3 that are male. So I would just like to see more openness regarding men and women receiving domestic violence. I'm not saying we shouldn't register and acknowledge the women, but men are going through it, and it seems to be a voodoo question. I was also shocked to see the rise in such numbers around depression. And then you look, is there any wonder when jobs are harder to find, you've got working people using food banks and needing to go to food banks, you've got teenage girls with period poverty, you've got drug use that's on the rise and keeps on rising, you've got services that are vital being cut, mental health at an all-time high, and then this is putting further pressures on our voluntary sectors, our voluntary services at the moment that are underfunded and overcut. So I'd just like to see, and you've talked about what you're doing, but it's not really in the report. So I'd just like in future when you put reports what we're doing to tackle some of the issues. You've talked about the facts and the figures, what are there, but you've just spoke about how you're tackling them, but not a lot of it is in there. But it's good work that you've brought so far. And also as you thanked Lynn for the work that she did in the first 6 months. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I did. I kept saying, so what are we doing about it? I must have said it 10 times. And I did try to tell you briefly what we're doing about it, but then I get cut short, so I should have made it even briefer. That's the problem. It's a very big, all-encompassing subject, this, and to condense it into a few pages is very difficult. On domestic violence, I agree with you. Perhaps the women's domestic violence against women has overshadowed domestic violence against men, but I don't think it's not the case that we've ignored it completely. For example, we had an event in the summer called Domestic Abuse, Everyone's Business. That's not saying it's women's business or men's business, it's everyone's business. On Monday, I mentioned there's going to be another event.
1 minute, Councillor Kay.
16 days of activism against gender-based violence on Monday, not against violence against women, violence against men, but gender-based violence. So I think we've got the message. It's taken a long time to come through, but we perhaps a bit slowly, we're starting to change to protect the whole of our population, whether it's men or women.
Councillor Pallister, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank the Cabinet member for his kind comments, and I'm pleased to see the continued positive improvements in many service areas across public health, housing and welfare. Can I just draw your attention to page 27, 5.10. It is good to see that the plans to further enhance services to support alcohol addiction and service improvement and treatment rates for both opiate and non-opiate are looking a lot better than they were. However, as challenging as this area is, drug and alcohol addiction, it is an area we must improve. Figures showed in June 2018, Redcar and Cleveland had a higher opiate and crack cocaine use with an estimate 14.3% compared to 8.6% nationally. Drug-related deaths, as I know you will already know this, was 37 in 2018 compared to 9 in 2014 and 6 in 2011. So we can see the rise, and I know we're trying to do a lot in terms of suicide prevention. I'm confident that the vulnerable persons model will improve the support we give to those with drug and alcohol addictions, those suffering domestic abuse, homelessness and mental health. But given the worrying increases, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, what we get as stats is nowhere near what's going on out there. The drug use in our communities is just not even showed in our statistics. It's everywhere. So we have to deal with it. So given the worrying increases in drug and alcohol addiction and drug-related deaths, not forgetting what it also provides and the effects of it. So you get more homelessness, increased mental health, increased domestic abuse, poverty. What I'd like to ask the Cabinet Member if he would consider a task and finish group to look more closely at the services we currently deliver. What funding is likely to be available, not just in Redcar and Cleveland, but from our partners across the South Tees Health and Wellbeing Board, and what the future model of the vulnerable person's future model will look like. I have a fair idea, but I'd like to look at it in more detail, as I'm sure other members would as well. And I'm not just asking the Cabinet Member to look at drugs and alcohol more closely for the individual addict. I'm asking for the families and the communities that are suffering the effects day in and day out. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, okay, well, can't really disagree with much of what you've said. But I don't want people to think that this council is not with limited resources, as has been already said, and with people often in desperate poverty, our officers are doing their utmost to tackle these problems and to change with the times. It's like shifting sands. Everything is changing at the same time. I think on the positive side, one way that drug addiction is measured is on the number of completed treatment, on the treatment rates. In other words, if a lot of people go through treatment, then it's a good sign. And our treatment rates have improved. We've got, as you'll know, Councillor Pallister, we've got Addiction working for us on substance abuse, the Transformation Challenge. We're moving into the vulnerable persons model, which I believe will really continue the Transformation Challenge. That we've learnt a lot from that. On the drug-related deaths, that's a big problem. But, you know, we're putting everything we can into it. We have a drug-related deaths coordinator. We have a drug-related deaths task force. You know, we're not just turning away from these particular issues. But I have no objection to a task and finish group at all. And I think probably it has to be approved by somebody or other, perhaps a scrutiny committee. So I'll just say that I have no objection to it. So if anybody's listening, do something about it, okay?
We have 8 more speakers, so can I please ask, when you come to the mics, please ask your question first, and then afterwards you can dress up how you want. But I need the questions, not just facts and figures that you're just reading in between the lines. Councillor Watts.
Quite a compendium of your new empire, but I think because of the number of items, it raises the issue of the importance of some financial accounting or oversight of all these items to ensure we're not duplicating what is done elsewhere. There are a lot of other resources setting up. I quote 525 when you talk about loneliness and isolation. Certainly, from attending the public health committees, there are schemes. I know Age Concern are doing an awful lot in that area. The churches are, other charities are. But one scheme promoted by public health is the Chatty Cafe, which costs nothing and is a valuable social asset. It requires cafes and other businesses to leave a table to one side that people can sit in knowing they're not intruding in somebody else's. It's a free, acceptable space to increase their communications. Costs nothing, very good. Are we actually looking into something like that? I'm looking in Gisborough, but is Redcar and Cleveland looking at something like that? On 520, under smoking, I listened to read all the issues you're doing, but I think one problem is highlighted. I know South Tees Hospital have widened the area around the hospital that is now smoke-free, and it has been very successful. We're in this building, which is at the heart of Redcar and Cleveland, hence the name, next to sports facilities, and what do we have in the square outside? Smokers. Is there some way of widening, at least in this area, as a signal to the residents of Redcar and Cleveland that we are clamping down on smoking? The last one is a very quick one on 559, the housing programme, which I know has done a lot, but I know how hard some people are to change. Can you give me figures for this project? How many people actually do we not succeed with, are not taking advantage of what is on offer?
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor Kate.
Right, well, you know, the acoustics in this building are terrible. I've been struggling to hear the questions, to be quite honest. And Councillor Watts has a very good voice, so I have a job to hear it. Right, I think your first point was that some of these voluntary organisations are doing the work of the council and there might be an overlap. I think I'd rather look upon that as a bit of sort of teamwork and partnership rather than an overlap, because that's what we're all about, communicating with each other nowadays. And our Empowering Communities team has worked wonders getting extra money for these voluntary organisations. If they weren't there, we'd be struggling even more. So, you know, I think we have to try to work with them. We obviously don't want to be doing exactly the same thing or pinching their work, but, you know, I don't think it's the case that we've got a sort of massive overlap which is damaging the finances of this council. You said about the smoke. James Cook is smoke-free, and you've just told me Gisborough Hospital is smoke-free. Certainly these places should be smoke-free. You link that in then with people smoking and they should be doing something more healthy or that sort of thing. This is what the local delivery plan is. This is what the local delivery plan is all about. It's sponsored by Sports England. It's going to bring millions into the borough, and the whole idea isn't to finance the Olympic Games, it's to inject an interest into people who up to now have not taken part in activities. And in doing that, we'll be in partnership with everyone active. So, I can't read my writing now. I think, I feel I've covered most of what you said, but
thank you, Councillor Kate. We have 8 more speakers, and I'll draw a line under that then, and can I just remind you to put the question first? Sorry? The speakers are Councillor Jackson, Councillor Ovens, Councillor Ryder, Councillor Hannaway, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Sue Jeffrey, Councillor Brown, Councillor Hannigan. That's the last of the speakers. So could you please put the question first and be as quick as you can. Councillor Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Steve, can you hear me in the cheap seats? Good, right. My question is to do with mental health and suicide, and And really is, my question is, as members, are we doing enough to tackle the issue, or are we paying lip service to it? The reason I ask is that over 2 years ago, Councillor Lanigan brought forward a case at full council about a resident who was suicidal, and she didn't know where to turn for help for that resident. And I spoke up at that meeting and said, well, actually, I've tried to commit suicide twice, and I suffer from depression and mental health problems. And Councillor Pallister, who was the portfolio holder at the time, very kindly organised a meeting for Councillor Lanigan and I with the then Director of Public Health, and things were going to get done, and they asked me about my experience, which, to be honest, was more luck that I'm still here than judgment. And we thought things were going to get moving and sorted, and since then we've not really heard anything. I got asked to write a piece for some doctors that were meeting with Public Health England about my experience at James Cook, etc., and out in the community, and nothing happened. And we last council meeting we had a minute's silence for young Jade Smith, who sadly committed suicide in Saltburn in September. And really, are we doing enough? Are we getting to grips with the problem? It's all very well saying we've got funding for this, that and the other, but are we targeting in the right places? For example, at the Malot meeting, we haven't had a representative from CAMS since March. Not only have we not had a representative at the meeting, they haven't even submitted a report. So how do we know that what we're commissioning is actually working? We have no idea whatsoever. They won't even reply to our letters that we send them. So while I welcome your report and the effort that is being made, I think we need to do more to remove the stigma. I mean, for example, my mother told me never ever to tell anyone that I tried to commit suicide. But how does that help anyone? It doesn't. But I speak about it, and no one seems to want to take it on and do something. So if we're getting a new Director of Public Health, can we again try to arrange a meeting to see if we can move this subject forward before anyone else and their families are affected by this devastating issue?
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Kerr.
Yes, well, I couldn't really argue with very much of that, but I think if somebody omits to come from a meeting, what the meeting should do is to write to the organisation who should have sent somebody and say we expect them there next time. Now, there's a connection here. We tend to perhaps to think of mental health, loneliness, suicide as being rather separate things, but I'm sure that if we could deal more effectively with the mental health and loneliness problems, we would probably reduce suicide considerably. So we've got to try to get in early and identify people who have these problems. Now, it's high on the agenda, of public health. I mentioned the 5 ways to well-being. That's a government initiative, Public Health England, to start to give more connectivity to people. I mentioned the 5 connections that can be made, and at the same time, our empowering community staff are going out and they're organising. And they did this in Loftus last year, Feel Good Loftus, to give people a sense of identity, a sense of community. The Transformation Challenge did it at Westmoreland Centre, where people were encouraged to take part in arts and crafts, gardening, cookery, etc. And a lot of it's down to feeling, well, you obviously know better than me, but I would think a lot of it's down to social isolation, and we tend to deal with that side of it, and of course there's the clinical side, which obviously GPs and consultants will deal with. So I don't think we're paying lip service to suicide at all. I think the council takes it very seriously. We're not in a happy position, even statistically, when it comes to suicide. So, you know, our officers don't sit back. If there's something unsatisfactory, they try to do something about it, and they are trying very hard. But the hard times we live in with universal credit and the cutbacks and all the rest of it, it's not easy.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Councillor Ovens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was just a comment in some respects, and a question for Steve is that we continue to use our both portfolios together from adult social care, because a lot of what was reported there would be very similar to what I would perhaps have in my report, because one impinges on the other. If people are having healthy, successful lives and achieving their full potential, then they're less likely to need the formal adult social care services. However, I would like to say as well that several of us were fortunate enough that we got the communication about training from Mind, which was on suicide. I think some members didn't get that invite. There was some communication breakdown, I don't know where from, but if that is reissued again, I would urge people to go along to it, because it was invaluable, particularly linked with suicides. And the Warm Well event this morning had most of these services there on offer for people to find out about, but these things have got to be well advertised, and often we're a little bit guilty, I think, of doing them just in pockets. And I guess the question is, can we roll out these events to all of the areas, not just in isolation? I would commend the transformation challenge and the new approach to vulnerable persons model. Whereas it's been very successful, it has been a pilot scheme in an area, and I would like to see it rolled out everywhere, so that everybody, every vulnerable person doesn't fall, you know, that nobody falls through the cracks, they're all picked up, and that everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential. And I'm sure that we will continue to work together and work with members, because all of this is happening out in all of our wards. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your indulgence.
Thank you, Councillor Ovens. Councillor Kerr.
Right, thank you. Yes, yeah, there is an overlap without doubt between our portfolios, particularly when it comes to dealing with adults. I don't think it's been a problem particularly. We work quite well together, I think, Mayor. Another success story. And we go to many things together, like, yes, I forgot to mention, we went to mental health training, and it was really down to earth. This was by Mind, and we got an awful lot from it. Sorry, suicide training, not mental health. It was about suicide. And I hope we'll continue to work together successfully. Yes, you're right. There are vulnerable people living in the most affluent areas in the borough, but they may just be living by themselves, and therefore there's a danger that people who are isolated like that are going to be overlooked. We do tend to target our efforts at the most disadvantaged areas, which is more cost effective, but Councillor Ovens is right, we must never forget people who are equally deprived in middle and more prosperous areas.
Councillor Ryder.
Mr. Mayor. Councillor Kay, I was interested in 521 here on page 29 about the Smoke-Free Action Coalition. And yesterday I was at James Cook Hospital, and two of the entrances there were past one and went into the other one. Then I couldn't help noticing, but the walls and the floors and even the windows were plastered with signs telling everyone that this was a smoke-free area, smoke-free hospital. Going in and coming out, there were, unless you're going to enforce it, there's no point in wasting money on signs, because going in and coming out, the doors round this bin were absolutely full of people smoking, and nobody doing anything about it. Lots of people tutting, but nobody was doing anything about it. So unless there's going to be some enforcement, there's no point in putting the notices up. And coming out, I couldn't help notice on the first entrance, which we didn't go into, there was somebody there walking around sweeping up the cigarette ends. The other one I wanted to mention was on 525, social loneliness and isolation. And I was interested to see that £18,510 was awarded to voluntary and community groups. Well, some years ago I started a friendship group in Newmask for people who were isolated, because they did identify someone, and it sort of forced me to start this group up. And it's been very successful over the years. We run trips, and we have a speaker every month, and raffle and bingo, things like that. Everybody enjoys it. But quite often I'm told about people who they've noticed are socially isolated, live on their own, maybe widowed, don't go out, complaining that nothing to do. And I actually go to visit those. I've been several times to visit people like that and welcomed them to the group, invited them down, told them what we were doing, and they don't want to come. And now the thing is, you can put these groups on, you can tell everyone about them, but if people aren't interested, I think there's quite a lot of money wasted there. I mean, no one ever offered us any awards. We're just been self-funded for the past several years, quite successful. But the point is, I think they're failing in a lot of ways, because how do you get people there when they don't want to go? They know they're socially isolated, but they just don't want to go.
Thank you, Councillor Ryder. Councillor Kerr.
Yes, yeah, actually, I was reluctant to mention this, but since you have mentioned it, when I've been to James Cook Hospital, despite the universal ban, I have noticed people smoking around the entrances and seen cigarette butts all over the place. And I agree with you that it should be enforced. What I'll do, I think, is ask the Smoke-Free Alliance Board to approach the National Health Service and James Cook Hospital to point this out to them, because, you know, as you quite rightly say, it's a waste of time doing it if people are just going to ignore it. Now, the second thing was about loneliness and people not attending. I agree entirely. You can't even get gregarious people to attend things. It's very difficult indeed. However, Age Concern, for example, provide one-to-one visiting. They've got a cohort of people who will go and visit people who are lonely. And you perhaps could see that as a first step. And when they befriend each other, hopefully, they can get the lonely person to join something like one of the, or to attend one of the organisations you've been talking about. But I agree, it's very difficult. You have to ask yourself, why are they lonely in the first place? It's often because they've got agoraphobia, or they just cannot bear to go out and mix with other people. And of course that would become a medical issue then. But individual visiting, I think, is a good start.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Councillor Hannaway.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your report, Councillor Kay. I'm not sure myself enforcement is the point. Looking at your very successful figure for reduction of smoking prevalence, it is very successful, but is it not also one of those figures which is at the same time correct and commendable, but also slightly misleading? Because it suggests that there's been a an across the borough level reduction in smoking from 21.8 to 13.5. But I could guarantee that that lower figure will have a higher proportion of less affluent people in it than the higher figure. So what's really happening is the number of smokers, it's tightening like a third artery around the lower income level. And that's also true of the 8% reduction in smoking in pregnancy on page 32. So for example, if you're a single parent with more than one job on a low income with no car, it's much more difficult to stop smoking than it would be for someone less stressed and less tired, simply because nicotine has psychoactive properties to keep you going when you're tired. And we need to acknowledge that alongside the fact that it's very, very bad for you. The initiatives like 5 Ways to Wellbeing, they tend to make the biggest difference to people who don't really need them. And this is what is meant by health inequalities. And it affects most of the sections on health in your report and is acknowledged in the report. But we don't always realize the way it lies underneath the data that we're given. Life expectancy is another one. We're often told that there's 10 years difference in life expectancy between our richest and our poorest wards. But behind that is a much worse figure for the difference in healthy life expectancy, which is the time that you get before you get a chronic illness, because that difference is 20 years. But your report, to its credit, gives all the ways in which the council and our partners are trying to make the situation better. But there are so many things in here that need improving and have been in our health reports for a very long time. You're making the changes that you can. Personally, I think there should be more focus on the issue of chronic pain, because according to Pain UK, there are 28 million people in this country living with pain, which is such a staggering figure. I think it almost defies belief, really. But when that combines with an issue like social isolation, you end up with people phoning for ambulances who really need long-term support and pain management, as the Cohort 30 initiative showed. And we really need more initiatives like that, because that put key workers in the actual call rooms at the police station. But the situation, would you agree with me, the situation as a whole won't improve until there's a different economic basis for our country.
Could we have your question, please, Councillor Holloway?
Where the system works for people rather than people working and sometimes dying for the system. Do you agree?
It sounds almost like a philosophical question. Well, I don't. Only in very extreme cases like warfare, I think, should people sometimes die for their country. I don't think you were really meaning that. But outside of that, I would think that the system should. I always think the government should look after the governed, and this is what should be happening in this country. And that means looking after people who are disadvantaged and trying to solve the problem of health inequalities. Around this, we do target, we concentrate on inequalities, that's our policy. But under the possible new funding arrangements, there is going to be an emphasis on more money for older people, less for inequalities. So our policy could be skewed, and our money will be reduced by government action, and we are to a large extent dependent on the government. I agree with chronic pain. I could have thrown cancer into the mix. The mayor wouldn't let me finish. I should have, in retrospect, I wish I'd cut a lot of the stuff out that I gave you, but then you'd say, this is a thin report, there's no statistics, there's no figures. You know, as a cabinet member, you can't win.
Thank you, Councillor Kate. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 4 questions. Before I ask them, could I suggest that governance look at time allowance? Clearly, the presenter, the portfolio holder of this particular report, felt compromised because he didn't have sufficient time. The report is really comprehensive, and perhaps one could say it would take longer to read the report than his presentation of it. However, that's by the way. I think we need to look at governance and give guidance to those people.
I was, in fact, intending to raise a point of order about this issue at the end of the questions, because my portfolio does, in fact, cover governance. I've got to commend you, Mr. Mayor, on allowing this question and answer session to, in fact, transform into more than just that. And I have to commend as well Councillor Kay for his resilience in answering the questions. I think the report stage of this council is an absolutely crucial process. It not only ensures that people get information, it may even produce consensus, but it also makes sure that those people in authority are held accountable. And so I think it's important. But for a long, long time, as Councillor Thompson has just said, this has been an unsatisfactory feature of the Constitution. It's not appropriate to ensure that this is restricted to such a tight time scale. I think it's important in terms of local democracy that we ensure that this particular type of item on the agenda is much more thoroughly dealt with. And so with that in mind, I intend to investigate this issue, and I think it will be important that we report back to the Scrutiny Committee and the Governance Committee and this Council on what proposals can be made to do this. This has been a problem for far too long under several administrations, and it's time that this was changed, and I intend to do something about it. That also echoes something that Councillor Kay said. What are we going to do about it? We're going to do something.
Thank you, Councillor Nightingale. I have allowed it to run over, but not to everybody's satisfaction. Today it's been allowed because we haven't got a lot on the agenda. But yes, in future it should be looked at. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my first question relates to 5.28, and that is suicide prevention. I would commend, first of all, Councillor Jackson for sharing her personal experience with us, and I thank you for that. There is a concern, clearly, that the work that is purporting to be done in addressing suicide prevention is inadequate. Therefore, I would ask that we do look at bringing this to the agenda of the next well-being board, so that we can be satisfied that there is adequate, sufficient, and penetrating examination and scrutiny of the work that is allegedly being carried out. So that's the first question. Can we please do that? The fact that signage is mentioned, the amount of time that ward members and councillors in Saltburn have looked at the signage on the cliff tops at, the time spent has been inordinate, and yet there is no positive outcome from it. So referring to targeted signage, we failed. Second question relates to clean air strategy 550. We did agree, Mr. Mayor, as an authority, earlier this year, I know it was under a separate administration, but nonetheless, that we would give adequate publicity to the work that this authority is doing in terms of guidance on wood-burning stoves and the negative effect on our environment of owners not using them properly. I haven't seen anything in any of our major publications that reflects the commitment to give greater communication and publicity on that. So I would reiterate my question that I asked earlier this year and was affirmed that positive action would be taken, hasn't. Please, can we do so? Also under clean air, my third question relates to the practice of parents taking their children to school in motor vehicles and then standing outside of the school with engines running, quite often in bus laybys. So my request is that we ask each school for a travel plan to indicate what they are doing about encouraging pupils to walk or cycle to school. And our objective should be, unless there are disabilities in pupils, for that to be the dominant, if not majority, if not the totality of ways of getting to and from school. And my fourth question relates to libraries. And I commend the work that is being done on a very comprehensive basis for the services that libraries are now delivering. However, Mr. Mayor, we were advised at a previous council meeting that if I wanted to fill my water bottle, I could go into any library and do so, discouraging the use of plastic bottles. Now, if I went into a library that I'm very familiar with, perhaps I should not name it, and asked for my water bottle to be filled, I would have to ask for it to be filled. I couldn't go to a ready dispenser. So that takes time of staff. So if there's a queue of people with bottles lining up, I don't expect library staff to have to give up what they're doing, go into a kitchen somewhere else, fill a bottle and come back with it. That is nonsense. So my request is, can we facilitate in every library in the borough a readily accessible dispensing facility of clean, preferably filtered water, so we can address this very challenging problem?
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I think with 2, 3 and 4, you're virtually asking me to make policy on the hoof. You know, I think a lot of this really should go through scrutiny and be so that we have a democratic decision, particularly about asking every school. Schools have enough to do if they all have to produce travel plans. I remember when Arthur Seed took all the water dispensers out of the town hall because the council was going broke. It's not a cheap thing to have dispensers in libraries. So that right, I'll work through them. I will request, because that's all I can do. Councillor Lanigan is, I think, the joint chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board. I can request that that there is an agenda item on suicide prevention. I can do that. Wood burning stoves, if we've already resolved to do something about this, then I would support that we do. Otherwise, I think it needs to go back to scrutiny. Travel to school, I've mentioned that already, and I've mentioned the libraries. So it's not the 25th of December yet, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Councillor Sue Jeffrey.
Yep, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Kay, for your report. I want to change the subject slightly to item 7 on page 41, which is the climate change update. And I've got a couple of questions that I'd like to ask on this. First of all, as chair of the Climate Change Task and Finish Group, I'd just like to thank the whole committee for all the work that they have done so far. We've done some really interesting work in the couple of meetings that we've had First of all, as it says on the bottom of page 42, developing a strategy for planting trees, which we hope is going to come back through the cycle at some stage, because planting trees, although it sounds fairly superficial, is actually a very good way of trying to offset carbon that's being created in our atmosphere. So that's really important. We've also provided a response to the two transport strategies, the TVCA's transport strategy and our own transport strategy, specifically looking at the carbon
Could I have
emissions.
your question, please, Councillor Jeffrey?
Yeah, I'm going to come to it, carbon emission issues. But the question that I've got, Mr. Mayor, is actually about leadership on climate change within the Cabinet. And you'll know that there was an update on climate change to Cabinet under the resources portfolio at the last Cabinet meeting. And here, in your own words, I think, climate change has been clagged on to your report. And, you know, bearing in mind that on the 28th of March, we did declare a climate emergency, so this is a priority for this whole council. I'm still waiting to see a Cabinet member at the Task and Finish group. So could you please tell me which Cabinet member is responsible for climate change? And could you tell me, please,
Thank you. We have a point of order.
I would just like to say that I'm on the Task and Finish thing, but you keep putting the meetings at the same time as other meetings. So how can we get there? I've sent the apologies. What can we do? Can't get there because you keep having the meetings when you want to have them and not when we can all get there.
Chair, can I just say that that is absolutely not the case at all, and that I am not responsible.
Can we decide this afterward, please, and get on with the question?
I know my point of order now, Chair, because I have been accused of organising meetings so that Cabinet members cannot attend. That is complete nonsense.
And your point of order is?
The meetings are organised by the Democratic Services Department to be convenient for the most people who can get there, and we are very concerned to ensure that Cabinet members can attend. So to get back to my point, Councillor Kay, could you please tell me who is responsible for leading on climate change within the Cabinet, given its importance? And my second question, bearing in mind that Councillor Thompson had 4, relates to paragraph 7.5. Street lighting electricity usage has decreased by 804,362 kilowatts. Could you please tell me the extent to which LED lighting has now been installed across the borough? Street lighting.
Yeah.
Councillor Kay.
Right, okay. Yes, I'll be honest, I always am. Especially when it comes to council tax. There has been a little bit of confusion. There has been a little bit of confusion over which portfolio holder is responsible for climate change. I had a meeting with John Sampson a few days ago. I said, I still don't know who's responsible, John. He said, you are. So it seems, at least for the managing director, that I am responsible. Because the problem emanated from the fact that Karen King has always shown a big interest in this. She moved the original motion, and there was some dispute about whether it should be in her portfolio or mine. And it is true that this, the climate change matter, I intended my report ending with the item before, and it's been stuck on the end because we promised to get back to you in time. So I'm interested in climate change. If I was younger, I'd be in the Extinction Rebellion. I really do think it's an existential problem for the world, and it needs to be taken seriously. And Alison, is she there? Can somebody from Democratic Services put me down for the Task and Finish group? Because I don't think I am a member of it, actually. But can I say that I think you'll agree, the Task and Finish group is very early in its deliberations, and I understand that it said to the officers, you know, if this matter is so urgent, just go out and do what's necessary. And one thing they have done is get 100% electricity through EDF from the Teesside wind farm. So, no, I'm praising you. You say, yeah, it's the point you said, go out and do it. They've done it. That's one thing they've done, which I think is commendable. Right, I haven't got very accurate figures on the rollout of LED lighting. I've had complaints from my own ward. I understand it's about 1/3 done. Certainly Gisborne's been done, I know that. But the problem with it is, it shines down, as it should, directly onto the pavement and the road. But people are used to the peripheral light that used to fall into the front gardens, and it makes them feel that they've been robbed of illumination. But hopefully people will adjust, and it is possible, because I've taken this up, it is possible to get your street or your area reviewed by the council, because the bulbs that they're putting in aren't all of the same strength. And so if you feel there's a problem area, it can be looked at again.
With regards to the motion, when it was passed by this council, it was agreed that the report would come back within 6 months. I was advised, because it fell within PERDA, that it would probably be not best for me to take it at this time, which it came. It does fall under Councillor Kay's portfolio, but with me bringing the original motion, I was going to do the update. I was advised not to. And I'd like to also agree with Councillor Hunt. Every single invite we've had to the Climate Task and Change Finish Group so far has been at exactly the same time as Cabinet meetings. So there's been a miscommunication somewhere with people arranging the meetings, because we haven't been able to go. It's not that we've not wanted to.
Thank you, Councillor King. Just for clarity, I'm being accused of being biased on one way. I'm allowing this debate to go on with outside the rules. I'm taking legal advice as I do so. I don't care what you think the rules are. The legal people advise me. Councillor Thompson asked if he could ask for four questions. It was my discretion. I allowed Councillor Keogh go on longer than he should, because it wasn't clear. Everybody gets a fair say in this place. It's democracy, which I believe in. So carry on as you're going. But next time, if we've got more on the agenda, I will shut you down straight away, and I won't take any bickering back and forward. Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Councillor Jeffrey asked me the question I was going to ask about street light.
Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Lanigan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure that Councillor Kay will absolutely agree with me on 5.53, that the targeted work for the private rented sector in Carling Howe is solely of the work of Councillor Barry Hunt and the other two Broughton councillors that we've got there. They've actually pushed this to the point where partnership working right across the board with ASBO team, neighbourhood workers, Cleveland Police and the Fire Service have resulted in some excellent work, and I understand that is continuing, and it is with great thanks to the Broughton Ward councillors that this has happened. I am Councillor Kay on the Health Joint Board along with Middlesbrough, and on the next agenda down at North Ormsby, it is suicide. It is being brought to the fore as a matter of urgency across both of the boroughs, and I will come back with a report for that. I can actually just tell members of the council, if it's okay with you, Mr. Mayor, that the curtilage of this building, it was coming to Cabinet on Monday. It will now be a no smoking area.
Thank you, Councillor Kay, for the report and all those that contributed. Item 9, is for motions, and we have none. We move on to item 10 to appoint members. Can the changes that have been circulated be agreed? Have a show of hands, please. That agreed? Thank you. Questions from members of the council. Two questions. Sorry. That's carried. Two questions have been received. Question 1, Councillor Hannaway to Councillor Lanigan. Councillor Hannaway.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Lanigan, given the increasingly dangerous use of language in political debate, does the leader agree that images portraying fascism and spreading Nazi images as a solution, in inverted commas, for the children of Skelton are not to be tolerated, and called out for the abomination it is? Would she further agree that this council should do all it can to condemn the use of such material and disassociate itself from such imagery and messages?
Thank you, Councillor Hannaway, for your question. Racism in any form will not be tolerated, either nationally or locally. The council are not associated with any form of racism that I am aware of.
Supplementary question.
So we have a Conservative councillor, a corporate parent, who has a good laugh at a spoof Nazi poster on Facebook which refers to the children of Skelton Reich. Then we have a second Conservative councillor who defends that and goes on to compare the Labour Party to Hitler's National Socialists, which is very ironic, because we also then have a third Conservative councillor who uses a quotation referring to the so-called overbreeding of Muslims. This is precisely the language that Hitler used about the Jews. They must have known what they were doing. Councillor Craig Holmes, for example, attended the funeral of Eddie Straight last year, the veteran who had to go to the Belsen concentration camp at the end of the war to clear up the bodies. What would Eddie have said about this? These days, schools have to teach children about British values. Presumably these are values we can share.
Make it quick, Councillor Hannaway, because your time's up.
They do not represent any British values that I understand, and many people died to prevent them being British values in the war. Will you now, Councillor Lanigan, stand up for our values and call for these councillors to be suspended from the council pending an investigation into their barbarous behaviour? Speak for the borough, Mary.
Supplementary question, Councillor Hannaway. I am not aware of any of these cases, and if you have any issues with any of the councillors that serve on this borough council, then I suggest you go to the monitoring officer.
We go on to the second question from Councillor Hannaway to Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Barnes, what is the current number of children in our care and where are they placed? What is the current number of children and young people at risk of VEMT, vulnerable, exploited, missing and trafficked? Has this number increased or decreased, and what were the factors involved?
Thank you. I can advise that the number of children in our care as at the end of October 2019 was 332. These were placed in a variety of different placements, including friends and family, in-house carers, independent foster carers and residential. The figures were 59 for friends and family, 105 for foster carers, 69 for independent foster carers, and 27 in residential. As regards the VEMT children, the number as at October 2019 was 24. This is an increase of 3. The factors involved are the same across the board in terms of any time that we report on VEMT children. there are a number who are at risk of child sexual exploitation and a number who are at risk of child criminal exploitation. I could not comment on the additional 3 children involved who were found to be at risk during the period up to October 2019.
For that answer. I know it might not feel very helpful for me to ask this when you're not doing a report, but I hope it is helpful, because what we have is a situation where 1 in 85 of the borough's children is in the care of its local authority. It is unprecedented, and it carries a high level of risk for us, and we must keep telling councillors that. Also, with child sexual exploitation, the dangers to our children are ever present. The effects of CSE include dropping out of education, unemployment, suicide, criminal behaviour, social isolation, pregnancy, mental health problems, drug and alcohol abuse, and homelessness. To be effective as a lead
30
member,
seconds, Councillor Hannaway.
there will be times when you and your director need to fight your corner against all the competing priorities that your colleagues are worried about, especially budgets. It will be hard for you to do that if children's services just becomes part of the furniture. And I think it's very important that you never let the cabinet just be about budgets, bins, buildings and bairns in that order. So to stop me having to ask you a question,
your time's up, Councillor Hannaway.
in every full
Again.
council, will you
Thank you.
consider bringing back the reports for every council?
Councillor Barnes.
Councillor Hannaway, I'm well aware of the pressures that are put onto children's services, and I fully agree with you that they should be communicated to the full council. However, I'm sure you're aware of the fact that the figures that I gave you today are very likely not accurate at all, simply because children come into our care, children leave our care, and the same is absolutely the same for the VEMT children. I am not proposing that and I haven't decided that the report should be completely stopped, not in the slightest. We have decided that they will come out every 3 months as opposed to every 6 weeks. And the reasons for this are, as I've said, there's rarely any significant changes to the information. One of the aims of the partnership is to reduce bureaucracy and costs, both in time and resources. As we know, officers are hard pressed, and there is a significant time involved in collating, editing and printing the report. And the timing of the report after corporate parenting board seemed logical. Of course, any important items arising will be reported to the council. And my understanding is that the frequency of the reports was instigated by the Labour group some time ago.
Councillor Thompson's on his feet first.
Mr. Mayor, I did want to raise a point of order in as far as the order papers, if I may, in terms of questions. You decided, understandably, at the last council meeting, because time had run out, that we couldn't address the full agenda as was provided to members. Your guidance was that questions that had not been able to be asked should be replied to in writing. Now, the implications there are that if a question has been tabled, that one might expect a ready answer to that question to be available. Now, not every questioner got a written answer in a reasonable time. So, Councillor Nightingale already said this afternoon that he is going to look into governance. So I would ask that, from a point of view of asking questions, that we have some guidelines on that as well. If we are going to get a written answer, which I can understand, then what it does not do is allow a member to ask a supplementary question. So there is an area there that I would like to have examined. Now, in addition to that, it would appear that we are allowed as members not to accept your ruling to receive a written answer, but we can subsequently ask that we can retable the question that was originally submitted. Now, again, I don't think all members are aware of that. So it would be helpful if we could have some protocols in place that address the situation that might appertain in the future that appertained at the last council meeting. So I would ask, Mr. Mayor, if we could ask Councillor Nightingale to pick up those points and discuss them with the monitoring officer and any other officer in respect of governance. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson has put me on the spot, but my impression was, and I definitely asked this question, what's happening with those questions that weren't answered? And my impression was that the response was that if the member requested to have them put to the next meeting, they could. If the member was satisfied that they were satisfied with a written answer, they would get a written answer. And so consequently, that did apply, for example, to the question to me from Councillor Jackson. Now, I'm perfectly willing to look into this, and I'm quite sure that the officers will be welcoming that particular activity with me. And I think it is important that we do ensure, one, that the proceedings of the council are properly operating, and two, are ensuring that there is, as I said earlier on, full accountability and openness in our local democracy.
Thank you, Councillor Nightingale. Can I just say before you start, on my agenda, the next item reads, can I remind members that if the questions are not answered during a council meeting because we run out of time, then they will be answered in writing unless the member who submitted the questions lets Democratic Services know that they would like the question to be carried over to the agenda for the next meeting. I take the point about supplementary, but I would think, I don't know, I'll seek advice on it, if they're not satisfied with the answer in writing, they could resubmit.
One quick point, and I don't wish to extend this, and thank you very much for allowing the discussion. If we ask a question in council, everyone hears the answer. So one of the criterion that we ought to have in place, if the answer is a written answer, every member should get a copy of the reply.
Thank you. Councillor Hannaway.
Mr. Mayor, I'll leave this to your discretion, but I just wondered if you wanted maybe to give Councillor Barnes an opportunity to qualify what she said about the figures probably not being accurate at all. Obviously, we give the best we can. They do change every week, and so it is difficult. The figure of children in care might not be exactly the same this week as it was last, but it would be a bit problematic for a lead member to say they were bringing figures that weren't accurate at all.
I'm being advised that would be opening another debate, so that question will have to carry over.
Ask for a point of clarification from the monitoring officer. Questions to Borough Council, I'd like to know what actually constitutes a question, because the questions submitted today, question 1 contained 2 questions, question 2 contained 5 questions, and then supplementaries on top. Could I please clarify, is there any limit? Can we ask 15 questions within a question, or are they limited to 1 question per each question? Thank you.
Is that a question?
Yeah, the questions are as put in writing to us and agreed prior to the meeting, and anything else is the discretion of the chair of this meeting.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance and contributions. We're now going to switch the lights on. Thank you.